Welcome to the Cottage Chronicles, a podcast for writers, readers, and creatives. Hola, mi gentes. Welcome back to the Cottage Chronicles. We are talking about the book lows. We have a correlating episode talking about the highs of writing and of publishing a book. Today is about the lows. And none of these are to be discouraging. They are really to prepare you and hopefully help you remember that writing is not always a high. There are ups and downs to writing, just like many things in life contain ups and downs. But let me just go right into it. Again, three lows for book writing. Number one is writer's block. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about what writer's block is, how it feels, how to get out of it. There are a lot of different beliefs and ideas about writer's block. There are people who believe that you shouldn't even put a name to it, that it's not real. Whatever you think about writer's block, there are moments in writing your book where either you just won't feel like writing or you won't know what to write. You will just hit a block in the road where you're not sure where to go next or what words to use. You know, you have moments where you just don't feel like getting up and writing that day, where getting up and touching your keyboard and coming up with the words it just sounds way too difficult. You can't feel emotionally excited to do it either. That is one of the big lows of writing a book. I typically feel this right in the middle or towards the end of writing my story. As I've shared before, I am a writer who so far has always done writing, what they call writing in the dark. The 4 books that I've written, I have a general idea of how I want the story to go in my head, but never have I pulled out sticky notes or note cards and written out an outline or major scenes and put them into orders. I don't understand. I'm really confused by how people write chapters and then rearrange their chapters. That has never made sense to me. I'm like, you can't just rearrange scenes. You know, they happen in a specific order for a reason. You know, if you have a scene that can just go anywhere, then what was the point of the scene? You know, that's how my mind processes it. And I know that I have a lot of learning to do in that area of how to outline, strategically plan a book and a novel. My 5th book, I'm getting started on here soon. I've mostly been working on character development and world building. And for that, I've been very strategic. I've been taking the notes and doing the work ahead of time versus letting it happen and come to me as I'm writing. But yeah, I feel like no matter how you write, no matter what your method, you will always hit a time in your writing where it just gets so difficult. It gets hard to get up, like I said, and feel motivated to sit down and write out those sentences to knock out a chapter that day. For me, again, it's mostly towards the end. I'm fairly good at getting probably 70 to 80% of the book done. And it's really those last 30,000 words, 30 to 40,000 words where I hit a wall. I hit a wall where I just can't move on. What I always say is I don't feel it today. I just don't feel it. I don't feel like sitting down. And I force myself to, I really do. I force myself to sit at my computer and say, just get out a chapter. A chapter can be 5 pages. You know, that's all you have to write today is a short chapter, you know, the basics of the scene. You don't even have to give description or, you know, a lot of flourish to it. Just get out the basic what happens. And there are times where I just struggle with it. My 4th book, by the time as I'm recording this, the 4th book is finished. It is going out to beta readers this week and the editing phase is already underway. I kind of do that simultaneously. I have beta readers who are amazing at helping me edit, looking for grammatical issues, typos. So I'm able to tag team my beta reading and my editing at the same time. But yeah, I hit a point where for a month, really, it was half of June and half of July where I didn't do any writing. I didn't. I tried really hard. I think I sat and stared at a chapter. I wrote some things. I ended up scrapping it all. I said, I'm not going to use this here. I'm not going to use this in another story. What I wrote is not good. And you know what? That was okay. It was okay because I knew I needed to step away. I needed to get this story out of my head for a little bit because sometimes getting away from it is what sparks new ideas. When you're too deep into something, that is when you can almost lose touch with it, which sounds crazy because you're so wrapped up in it, but that is when you can lose touch. I heard a great TED talk once saying boredom is what sparks creativity. And I think creativity burnout is so real and so easy to do. I think creativity takes practice. I don't think creativity comes naturally to a lot of people all the time. It takes practice, but there's definitely burnout. And so writer's block, it happens. And that's, I think, the biggest low. After you've gotten excited about writing your book, you write some major scenes, you write a good chunk of it and you're feeling good. The next low is when you putter out a little bit. The second low for me, which is the biggest low by far, is when you're working through the formatting stage, sometimes the editing. I used to hate editing, my first book especially. But what I have learned, and here's a little tip for the future, and this will probably be a whole nother episode, is that when you edit one book, and it is just so difficult, the good news is all the editing that you learned about how you write and your writing style and all these mistakes that you found and these things you have to do to improve your book, it sticks with you big time. It is, for me, it was so hard editing my first book, so incredibly difficult. But the second and third books, I did not make the same mistakes. I was very aware, very keen on the edits and remembering all the time I spent editing certain things to make sure I did not do that the second and third book, that I got it right the first time, because I did not want to have to do it all again after I'd written the story. It was easier to do it as I went. And so that's what I did. And I learned so much from that first horrible round of editing that it made editing for my second and third book so much easier. My fourth book that I'm doing now, the editing has been so much easier because I've remembered the lessons, even from the latter two books. When I wrote Altar and Prophecy, the second and third book of the Laurel Vaughn series, I learned things from there as well. How to end chapters better, how to start chapters better, how to segue from scene to scene a little more smoothly. Those kinds of things I learned to apply then when I wrote my fourth book, because I didn't want to have to do it in the editing phase. And so there is so much to learn through it, but it is a pretty big low. Along with that, I do editing / formatting can be a low. And this is for me, your experience might be different, but for me, formatting is very difficult. Depending on how you upload your files for different publishing companies, they need it formatted differently all the time. And sometimes when you export a file, it does not always carry over your formatting correctly. You have to make changes and fixes. So for me, this is where I got frustrated, because when you're uploading 100,000 words, you don't want to go through and scroll through page by page to make sure all formatted correctly. There was a time where I was using an ebook program for Amazon. And I won't say it because I don't want to talk negatively about specific programs by name, but I was uploading my manuscript to be an ebook through this program, and it took away anything in italics. This was the only way I knew how to upload the file. I didn't know of any other way. And so I had to go page by page through it was 120,000 word book, and find every spot where something was supposed to be italicized. If you've read my books, you know that the people and dragons communicate by thought. And I indicated this by not using quotes, but italicizing the sentences. That's how you knew that they were thinking back and forth to one another. And I had to go and find every time that happened. Every time someone thought something to themselves, it was italicized. Every time I had an emphasis on a word in dialogue, it was italicized. And so it was a very frustrating process. And I know that others have run into this. I know people who have experienced very different issues in the formatting stage. So this is, the second low for me. This is the lowest of lows that I experience. I can get through the writer's block. I know I'll always get in that mood eventually to sit and write again and get inspired again. But formatting, that is the low for me. The final low, the third low that I would want to talk about, is when you've published your book, you feel like you've done a ton of marketing to get it out there, you've been talking to people, and you just don't see book sales going the way you thought they would. It doesn't seem like anyone cares, honestly. If you're a new author, a new publisher, if you're someone just getting started, you may experience this. I priced my books rather high for most of the market because I knew that I'd spent a good chunk of time on them. I thought they were worth the money that I wanted to charge. And so I priced them a little higher. I didn't know if that was maybe something to do with why they weren't selling to hundreds of people, or if it was just my reach wasn't big enough yet. My social media didn't have enough followers who were converting to sales, whatever it may be. That was a low for me. And for me, this wasn't difficult because I knew, I'll write more books as people get into the series, as I get new buyers, they'll get excited. They'll love it once they read it. And, yeah, so that was a difficult low, but I would encourage you as you have those low sales, or as maybe you get criticism from others. Some of you don't take criticism well. I know there are times I have not taken criticism well, and it can be a really big low. Just remember that as people read your story and fall in love, they will want to read more. When people like an author's voice once, they tend to like an author's voice twice. So just remember that all these lows are usually followed by a high. When you don't see sales in your book, when you don't see a lot of traffic around the story that you've created, just remember you're going to get a message from someone who says, "Hey, your book just arrived in the mail. I can't wait to read it." And that will give you a high all over again. You'll feel so excited, inspired, motivated. Just remember not to rely so much on other people's response and just keep doing what you're doing, because your story needs to be in the world.
Thank you for listening to the Cottage Chronicles. If you're interested in references or resources mentioned in this podcast, or have questions for the host, or have interest in being a guest, please visit tkjohnsonbooks.com.